Okay.
Hello, everybody. This is Elizabeth Clare Brewington and Ramona Carr with Brightside Global Trade. And we have just finished reviewing a marvelous book. And it's perfect timing because next month is Women History Month. And we will be putting this book on our recommended list for the Brightside Club as well as for our Women's Conference. And we're delighted to have the author with us, Dina Greenberg. And we would like to talk so much about this book. So there's no limit on time. And so let's get right to it. My question is, Dina, that you've written this amazing book. Why now? It seems like 25 years have passed, or it's been a long time since this war. And so why now?
Well, why now is an interesting question, although I started the book more than 15 years ago. So sadly, it's kind of coincidental that the book came out at the end of October. And as you know, politically, things have been heating up again in Bosnia. And we're never going to be at a place, it seems, where there isn't some sort of a conflict going on in the world and where refugees aren't going to be in the news. So yes, it is current. But when I began the book, as I said, more than 15 years ago, it was just because it was very difficult for me to know that here is a war that was taking place in the 1990s on European soil. There was a genocide happening. And it was the sort of thing where I tucked away that information and I didn't write about it right away, but it really kept nagging at me. And I knew that eventually it was going to be something that I needed to write.
All right, there you go. So Ramona, over to you.
Well, can I comment on any other, have I to comment on this question?
Yes.
Or?
No, you can comment on anything you want.
So what strikes me is that you painted a very realistic picture of Nermina. You didn't make her out to be this noble person, someone who says, oh my God, I shouldn't have done what I did. I shouldn't have trapped Carl. I should have, she's someone who's very human. You've emphasized her humanity. I mean, in a lot of books, the main character has the aha moment. And in this book, maybe she doesn't. If she hadn't run into Carl's brother, she would never have sought out Carl and told Carl that he had a daughter.
Ramona, thank you for speaking to that point, because that's exactly it. Nermina is far from perfect, but I think that when I first started out with her as a character, I was treating her so carefully. I wanted her to be perfect. I was idealizing her family. She had two parents, both doctors, and a brother who was in the financial industry. And initially, the first, I'd say, several years of my working on this book, I was treating her as though she needed to be perfect. And then because of the help, with help from some of my writing mentors, that was a main point, that she's not perfect. She's going to make mistakes. And you're exactly right. I firmly believe that had Jeff not been at her hospital, had she not had to treat him, that she may not have contacted, she probably wouldn't have contacted Carl.
No, it was Jeff. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and all the I noticed that a lot of the female characters in the book are interesting in the sense that Rebecca and then Tessa and Lisa, they're all going through a lot of emotional trauma because of who their husbands are and their personalities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They're bearing a lot of the baggage.
Yeah, but I think that that's true in real life. And one of the things, Jeff and Lisa are, they're primary characters in a sense, because without them, the story really doesn't happen. And when you said that, you know, a lot of times women, we bear the burden with, especially deployed troops, whether it's, you know, the husband or the wife,
Yes.
or the brother, sister, whoever is deployed. Lots of times, it's the women who are home and the women who are picking up the slack. And you know, it's especially with Jeff and Lisa's situation where they were, I don't think that this is a spoiler, but I think that for a long time, Jeff and Lisa were trying so desperately to conceive and have children. And those deployments, those multiple deployments, they
Yes.
add so much stress to people's lives.
Yes. I think the healthiest couple there emotionally are Refa and Samir.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're
Yeah,
right.
they seem to have led blissful lives. I mean, Samir is just the doting husband, and then the father and the
Yeah.
grandfather.
Yeah, yeah.
I have to butt in here because you're really good with describing characters. And one of my favorite characters in the book was Dr. Chong. And the
Oh my
whole
God.
doctor
Oh
visit.
God.
I mean, I could almost, you know, picture her completely. You've described her so beautifully. So
Thank
back to you,
you.
Ramon. I didn't mean to intrude, but
Yeah, I mean,
all
I
the
really,
characters are wonderful. Yeah.
Dr. Chong rubbed a nerve because I really am so unhappy with the health insurance situation in our country. And Dr. Chong gets right down to it. You want something, insurance doesn't cover it, you've got to fork it out of your own wallet.
Exactly, exactly. That was a pivotal moment for Nermina, because that's the plot right there. She comes from a medical background. So for her, it seems pretty simple. She'll get what she wants through in vitro. And then she finds out, well, wait a minute, this is going to cost thousands upon thousands of dollars. And in Bosnia, under the communist system, there was socialized medicine. So, you know, not that it was always wonderful, but what my research told me is that anybody who needed healthcare would receive healthcare. If you had a lot of money and you were able to bribe doctors, then you would get even better healthcare. So it was very surprising for her to be in this country, and you know, she was getting all of her services as a refugee. So, you know, she was expected to go to all those doctor visits, whether they were for, you know, a physical reason or for her emotional care, her behavioral health care. So she was doing all that, but she had no clue that she would run into a Dr. Chong.
I also I'm also intrigued by one thing in that you did not go into details about, you know, we left her at getting counseling, and then the next thing is she's a nurse practitioner. So the reader is left to assume that she got a lot of support and financial help to go to school to be a nurse practitioner, because it takes a lot of schooling. It's your undergrad degree and getting into the nurse practitioner program.
Correct.
So I'm assuming that she got some kind of financial help. She repaid her debt. She bought a home. So I'm kind of speculating, where did she get all that money from?
She worked. She worked really hard. She was working at a full-time job at the VA Medical Center, which does in many cases, working in a hospital system, there is tuition reimbursement.
Okay, I see.
So
That was what it
I
was.
was kind of taking a page out of my book, because that's what I did. I attended the University of Pennsylvania, and a good portion of my tuition was reimbursed because I was also working at the time in the Department of Public Affairs. So, so yes, but she was also a saver. And she also had the, you know, good friends that really supported her. And she had a place to live when she was raising her daughter. Initially, that was a big part of how she was able to do what she did.
You also raised a lot of issues about post-traumatic stress and, you know, the importance of therapy and getting help. Because
Yes.
obviously the therapists were able to help her with her post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of overlap in the book of characters who have been through trauma and are suffering from PTSD. And I wanted that piece to be authentic. And so a lot of research went into, understanding how PTSD would play out. And one of the things that I did in my background was to study the clinical piece, study the research piece, and have creative writing workshops with family members, with military, returning veterans and military families, to talk about how do you have someone who has been in a war zone 1 minute, and now they're home, and now they're going to their kids' soccer games, they're going to the mall. But that same physiological autonomic nervous system reaction is still happening in that person from PTSD. So I really wanted to make sure that all of those details were on point. And I am so fortunate because I have a close friend who is a psychotherapist who deals primarily with people with trauma. And I had her read the entire manuscript. And, she said, here's where you need to go into more detail. It would be like this. Jeff's, the scene where Jeff is having, he's re-experiencing his trauma in a flashback. So the way I wrote that, it took a long time for me to figure out how to do it. But essentially, it's really just, you are pulled from your consciousness. You are pulled from where you are right this moment, and you are pulled into that moment that happened in the past. And with PTSD, it's like on a cycle, and you're stuck in that experience. And one of the things that I learned through research and through talking with colleagues and friends who do this sort of trauma work clinically, is that there are a number of ways that you can get beyond PTSD, but it is all going to involve very, very hard work, whether it's talk therapy, whether it's something like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, whether it's a combination of medications and talk therapy, exposure therapy. It's not a quick fix. And I think that that's an important point I would like to make. Nermina as a character, she's not fixed. She's coping. She's coping. So I don't want to downplay that piece.
I applaud you for writing the book. I can just only imagine just reliving it, and now doing all these podcasts, and just every minute that you relive the story, it must be so hard. And but thank you for doing this, because it's necessary, and you might help so many going through what you went through, with flying colors, I would say, but really a tough journey. Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, I appreciate that, but I think the point is that I am telling a fictional story of people who this was their real life. So when I don't know if you saw the foreword to the book. It's written by a woman by the name of Zrinka Bralo. And Zrinka was my sort of the person that I modeled Nermina on. She was a young professional TV journalist during the war. She was trapped inside her TV studio, CNN TV1, during the siege of Sarajevo. And she gave me those details that Nermina
You built
went
the story
through.
around. Yeah.
I wrote it around her experience. And now what's really remarkable is I have been working probably for the last 18 months on collecting other stories, collecting stories of women who were just children at the time of the war. And they talk about what it was like to be uprooted from your home, from
Yeah.
your school, all of that. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I
But
feel like
yeah,
it's
it is just hard. I mean, the way you've written it, it just is, you can feel the pain, and you know, even if it's fiction, it's still a tough book to write. It's still these characters are very hard and real, you know, they feel so real. Yeah, back to you, Ramona.
Well, this book was personal to me because I lived 5 years in Portland, Oregon.
oh my
So I
goodness.
really was very happy to read something that was set in Portland. And Portland has has wonderful services for refugees. And
Absolutely.
it speaks to their social services available for refugees. And I know someone who was working in the system. So I was very happy that it was set in Portland, and, you know, really happy about
Wow.
that. Yes.
Yeah, that was one of the things that drew me. I knew I needed her to land someplace in the United States.
Yes.
And I researched that and saw that Portland was one of those places that took in a number of refugees from Bosnia.
Mhm.
Now I'm learning that there's a huge Bosnian population, both in St. Louis, Missouri, and in Chicago, of all places. It's not, I think it makes sense that when people come from any refugee group, it might be, a handful of people in one family. And then when people are getting ready to come, those family members will bring them in. And that happens a lot. So it's been interesting to kind of see, to see how that works. And I mean, sadly today, we've got refugees that want to be in the United States, and we, in my heart of hearts, I really hope that we can welcome as many people as we can, but I know politically it's not the reality. So that makes me sad.
Part of me would have liked to see a little bit of a reunion between Nirmina and the little boy, Edgemere, I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
I really would
So,
have liked them to
yeah,
meet somehow, but
that's a
yeah.
lovely part of the book. Yeah.
Thank you. I struggled with that, whether there would be a point where,
yeah,
but it felt like it was going too far afield of
right,
how Normina needed to be focused on having
right,
her own child. But
right,
he's important. That
right.
boy
So I was
is
thinking maybe
important.
he'll somehow, they'll meet somewhere and there'll be you know, because I'm just hoping his aunt took good care of him.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the thing. I feel like that little boy was fortunate in that he had someplace to go. There's so many children
Yes,
in these wars that there is no place for them.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, but I love that child.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you took
It
great
was
care with the
beautiful. Yeah.
details, the cuisine and the snacks and everything, the Italian snacks. So
Thank you.
Yeah, who can't love that child? It was so adorable. So on that note, I've put we highly recommend that you get this book, Namina's Chance. We'll make sure that you have the link. And thank you for watching this Brightside broadcast interview. And thank you, Ramona, so much for reading the book with me. And this
my
was just
pleasure.
a lot of joy. Thank you for writing this beautiful book. And yes, I think I can't wait if it does become a movie. That would be awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you both for having me.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
most welcome, Dina.